Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I'm Jay Edgar, and I am joined today by a Liberty promoter, a Liberty cheerleader, and the only person I know that has Thomas Jefferson socks. Please welcome to the show, Steffi Cole. Steffi,
Hello!
how are we doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Before we get into topics today, I got a couple of announcements to make. One of the first big announcements, and as we were watching on Twitter, Steffi knows a little bit about this already. This is going to be the first official episode of Ed's World that is partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group.
Yay! That's awesome.
Just a little bit about that. My friend Jake, who's been on this show before, started a website a little while ago, and it kind of fell a little bit to the wayside as he got busier, and there didn't seem to be as much interest in it as first, but we've come together. We've tried to revamp it and make it a little bit more modern. We're in talks right now to actually make a podcast hosting segment to that, so that'll be for people that we support, and there are some people we are thinking about reaching out to. Currently, my video channels are automatically uploaded to there, so that's another place you can go and watch me on freedomscoop.com. And we plan to add more writers and more videos to the site, so make sure you go over there and check that out. That will be linked down below, and I just bumped my microphone in the description.
I like your microphone, by the way.
The Golden Ed's Blog Productions microphone?
Yes.
I had to steal something from Rush. Thank you for that. You know, I was thinking about something earlier too, and it's kind of funny here because, before I approached you, you didn't even know that I really existed at all, and then just one day I said, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" And now we've been in kind of communication back and forth. But it occurred to me, I was thinking about this morning. I remember, I'm a little older than you, so maybe internet culture
sure?
wasn't. I
Are
think
you
so.
sure you're older than me?
I'm pretty sure. I just turned 35, so.
Oh, okay, I'm
a true.
31. I just turned 31.
I was about to say a true lady never reveals her age, but you beat me to it. So.
Okay.
Well, you then remember too, when internet culture was first coming out, and your parents always said, "Well, don't talk to strangers on the internet." And here I am now, and I make a career out of talking to strangers on the internet. So.
Exactly. I guess the scary part is actually meeting them in person.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the part that your parents really warn you about.
I may or may not have done that in the past before I got onto this. But it's interesting, too. I mean, if you look back and think about it, I just started this podcast a few months ago, and I had some friends at the time where we could actually get this going because they all had shows and they were all eager to do that. But, I mean, now that I had some legitimacy behind me and some episodes behind me, I can come out and say, "Hey, you want to do my podcast?" Whereas I think back in January it would have been, "Hey, girl, you want to do my podcast? I got candy in my van."
Yeah, I mean, you seem extremely professional. So honestly, that was my first take of you. I was like, wow, he really knows his stuff.
I'm glad that you think that, because let's be completely honest. This is a duct tape and baling wire production. But as we're going forward in this, now that we've shared this anecdote here, let's talk a little bit now about the topics we're going to talk about. Today we've got probably a pretty heavy and dark workload today, and I know we'll have some stuff to brighten it up at the end, but Rod Rosenstien turned in his letter of resignation very shortly after the Barr hearings. There's been a little bit of information on that. Maybe not so much not so much motives about that, but we'll talk a little bit about what happened there and some of the speculation behind that. 2 shootings happened this week. One was very, very harshly covered by the news, and the other one almost fell out almost immediately. We'll talk a little bit about those. As we always do on this show, we're going to talk a little bit about 2020. There are a couple of new topics there, and I've got a list of questions that I always ask my guests. So we'll get those questions answered, and I'll update some of my answers as time has gone on. The Venezuelans have officially decided that they are going to rise up against their government, and we saw some very disturbing pictures in the news after the uprising, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And with your work with Liberty, and from what I've seen Austin Peterson, I think you'll have a very unique perspective to that, so I'll be glad to hear that.
Sure.
And the big story of the week is that William Barr testified in front of Congress. My solo video was on the Barr testimony and some of my commentary to that, but we'll get another voice into this and decide what we feel about this and what we're going to see going into the House testimony. It is going to be all of this and more on Ed's World. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube. That really helps us move up the charts. Thanks again as well for subscribing on your audio platforms. If you're listening back to this later, make sure you do hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts.
I'm your little sidekick.
Well, you said Liberty Cheerleader, and I love Liberty, so... Before we get into the topics, though, it's very important and part of my favorite segment of this show to talk about the most important part of Ed's World, the guest. So, Steffi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Michigan, born and raised. I am 31 years old, as I just revealed. A lot of people do not know this about me because I don't share it on Twitter very much, but I actually have a master's in social work, and that is my career. That's my job. I work 40 hours a week. So my side hustle is actually Liberty. And so I do all of that at night and on weekends. So it's definitely hard to find time sometimes, and I'm really tired a lot. But just a little bit about how I got started in the Liberty movement. I once was a Democrat. I voted for Obama in 2008. My boyfriend started going to a business school, and he started introducing me to economics and teaching me everything he was learning in school. So that's how I kind of started learning more and more about the Liberty movement, the Tea Party movement, Ron Paul. I used to actually watch Alex Jones and Jesse Ventura. I kind of got started in the whole conspiracy theory movement. And then I got into Gary Johnson, Austin Peterson. I started volunteering for him. And now I'm just kind of breaking out on my own. And I'm just trying to keep a positive outlook on liberty and trying to motivate everybody else around me.
And I saw that you have a YouTube channel as well. And from your Twitter feed, you post up little short videos about your reading space and climbing up on tables. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you decided to get into alternative media?
It was actually by accident. So I've been on a liberty learning journey. So after the Austin Peterson campaign was over with, I'm like, what should I do with my time? So I figured out that I want to learn more. I mean, I know about the issues. I know about the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, things like that. But I want to dig deeper. I want to know why. So I just started reading a lot of the classics. I read Human Action, Free to Choose, Road to Serfdom, Back on the Road to Serfdom. And so I started making videos because I would want to share out quotes in the books because they excited me so much. And so one day I realized I couldn't post a video over 2 minutes on Twitter. And so I'm like, how am I going to share this? So I put it on YouTube. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll do that. And so then one thing led to another, and I'm like, this is kind of fun. So that's how I got into it.
Well, thank you for that. And I love that segment because everybody who's been on the show has a different story, but they always wind up on the left side of my screen. And you're the first person that's on the left side of my screen that is sitting over the top of our opening slogan.
Oh, what is that? What's our opening slogan?
Where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I want to take just a second, and usually this is always in the show notes, and the credit is always going to be there. But since this is the first time we're using this new back mat, I did want to give a shout out to Jake from Freedom Scoop, who we cited before, who put that back mat together for me kind of on a whim on a Sunday. So it wound up looking great. He actually made a trailer for this entire podcast too, but I haven't figured out how to get it off of the direct message and into my feed so I can share it out. So I think tonight I'm going to be looking into that a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be cool to see that. I can't wait to see.
It was really good. I'm kind of sad that I haven't figured out how to get it out of there yet. But I'll get there. I promise. Well, we've had some fun starting out here, but now we have to be sad for a little bit. So let's start Well, with the, I guess the most positive one, because there were mixed opinions on Rosenstein and his involvement. This past week, I got the news, I saw on Twitter first actually, that Rod Rosenstein had turned in his resignation letter to Trump. I've actually sat
Hmm.
down and read the resignation letter. It's not negative by any means, but you can tell that he wasn't happy that he was being put into the position that he was in. Um, as I mentioned when we were teasing topics, we are sitting back in wondering what the motives were. Some people have speculated the motives, but for the most part, it's still completely unknown. Where did you first hear about this?
I would say I love looking up news stories on Google pretty much. So, I mean, it just kind of pops up. I didn't really hear too much about it,
Yeah,
honestly.
it fell out of the news really fast.
Yeah, it just I don't know. I didn't focus on it at least when I was searching for things, but it's in the news if you look for
Hmm.
it.
Well, the interesting thing, and we're going to talk about this a bit more towards the end of the show, but it was right after the Barr hearing, and we talked a bit about this off mic, but Kamala Harris really put her thumb down on Barr over whether or not Rosenstein should have been involved in any of this. And I do
Mhm.
have to wonder now if that partially fueled the fact that he is going to be resigning. He wasn't fired. That much I can tell for sure.
Right. Well, do you think someone kind of nudged him a little bit though? Like, hey, you should do this. You should get out of here.
I'm a little bit on the fence on that, actually. I'm not going to lie about it. I had to think about that for a second because it doesn't it looks like he was kind of disappointed with the outcome of the Mueller report, to be completely honest. And he was the
Mhm.
person that was overseeing the report. He was actually the person that hired Robert Mueller, but he was also considered to
Right.
be a witness in the crime of firing
Yeah,
James Comey.
which is so crazy to me. I mean, this is just such a messed up situation. It's like everyone knows everybody.
Yeah, everybody's got their hands in each other's pants as they go through in Washington. That's nothing new for any of us. So,
Mhm. It's like, why can't they just find people who are not connected to other people? Is that possible?
well, because nobody wants to go into D.C.
That seems to be true.
Well, that's the thing. I don't understand. First off, is there actually a crime for the firing of James Comey? I know that that's what they're going to trot out for the obstruction of justice, but there was no underlying crime for that to be obstruction in the first place.
Well, weren't they trying to blame Rosenstein for firing Comey? Or they're trying to say he did it, Trump didn't do it?
I don't know if they're trying to blame him for that or if they're trying to link him as involved because he's a witness to that. He's not the standing as the accused.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if how that would work necessarily because I don't think he's being indicted for it. I think they're trying to still push that back onto the president as part of the impeachment process.
Hmm. Yeah, I think they're just trying to say that the president was trying to push Rosenstein to take ownership of something he didn't actually do. So I could see where that's sort of a crime on the president's part.
Yeah. Now, given the fact though that he is going to be a witness into that firing, and it was already established. I mean, Barr came out and said it perfectly. The fact that he got through the ethics committee because he was appointed to the position, and by all means, he
Mhm.
should have been a part of that process. But do you think he should have been a part of the Mueller report, given the fact that he was involved with the Comey firing?
I don't think so. If you're a witness, you shouldn't be involved in any other way, in my opinion. You should only have one role. Either you're a witness, or not. So,
Well, and it's hard to say too because I mean, with the fact that Sessions recused himself, um, Rosenstein was the next one in line, so he was the natural one to take it over. He either had the option, yes, to recuse himself
mhm.
because being the deputy, he passed the ethics committee, and
Right.
96-4, the Senate said that he would be appropriate to do so. But I, I have a hard time calling this a conflict of interest, mainly because I don't think that there's a crime there for the Comey firing as much as other people are trying to say that there is.
Do you at least think it's a little shady what's going on?
A little, but that's all the price of admission for living in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. It's expected, but I just feel like this situation is not making DC look any better right now.
I don't think that there's any medicine that is going to make DC look any better at this point. I'm not going to lie about it.
Unfortunately, I'm agreeing with you.
I mean, I had a little bit of a plan to run for Senate against Baldwin over here in Wisconsin last year when she was up, but you know, I still looked at DC. I'm like, do I want to?
Yeah, it's like being in office is not all butterflies and roses. I don't know if it's as fun as it seems to be. I don't know if you can really make that change that you're hoping to make.
It is hard because there's such an opposition to you. I mean, the platform that I had was going to be fewer laws. Let's repeal as many laws as we can and put things back into the hands of the state. Meanwhile, you're standing here with 534 other people that say, let's grow the size and the scope of the federal government.
Right.
So
yeah, we're up against a lot of people, but I would say our movement is growing, and that's what's exciting me and motivating me to keep on fighting.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, too, about the AG's office and Rosenstien and Barr and Sessions and all of the other people that are down the chain from him versus us talking about running for office and changing things in office. If we run for office, or the people that we choose to represent us in office, they're elected officials. All of these people in the AG's department are appointed officials. They're unelected, either bureaucrats or hand-appointed officials from whoever's in charge of the executive branch right now. So that is an interesting, because you're not only trying to fight against the 534 other people who want to make the government bigger, but at this point, a lot of the government is being controlled by these unelected people. So you've got to combat that too, and the fact that if you're combating that, you're taking away their paycheck. Because, I mean, I bet you 3/4 of these unelected positions could probably be eliminated at this point.
Oh, absolutely! I completely agree.
That's pretty much what I have on that. Like I said, that was a small story that fell out of the news pretty quickly, so there wasn't a lot of information there. Let's talk about these shootings that happened on both coasts of the state, or rather, both coasts of the country this week. Wow, I can't talk tonight. That's going to be great on the audio platforms.
Don't worry, I have that problem a lot.
As I was closing out my last podcast, this was actually happening. Synagogue during Passover was shot up by a man, and I'm not going to be like Shapiro and say, we don't say his name on the air. A young man named John Ernest came through with an AR-15 and started shooting at a California synagogue during Passover services. Now, a lot of people are a little bit mad about this shooting. This is another story that fell out of the news almost instantly because it would have been right on the narrative of an AR-15, and I know that David Hogg and many of his friends were trying to blame this on Donald Trump right away, but Ernest came out and expressed that he hated the president and his agenda and his ties with the state of Israel. We'll talk about that in a bit. But the other narrative that many of the people in the news media don't want to bring up on this is the fact is this was stopped by a good guy with a gun.
And usually these things are. That's normally how it happens.
So why don't you give us a little bit of insight in what you've seen on this so far?
Well, honestly, I can kind of talk about how it relates to me. I'm actually Jewish myself. So I can only imagine how scary that must be to be at a synagogue and, see a gunman. And I personally think about it whenever I go to synagogue, especially for the high holidays that we have, like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because I kind of look around, I see if there's any suspicious people, and, it's definitely in my mind because of things like this that have happened. And there's actually at my synagogue, there is a guard that stands at the front entrance, and I don't know if he's armed, but he always wears like a long coat, so you can't really tell. And he kind of blends in with, the people who are going to the synagogue. So, but I feel somewhat safer with him there because I feel like, maybe he has some tricks under his belt that I don't know about.
Well, and that's the thing too. Is I mean, you bring up the fact you don't know if he's armed. That's a big part of the movement right there, and the idea behind the concealed carry movement is because you don't know who's carrying and who isn't. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that guy in the long coat might just be cold, and he might be packing a 500 under there. You don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I guess in my mind, I'm hoping that he's carrying just for the sake of the synagogue, because I hope that we're safer than I think.
Well, this is an interesting perspective too, because I mean, we're looking at this. You're looking at this right now because this happened probably a few hours before you were going to be set to go to synagogue, being in Eastern time, and this event happening over in Pacific time. So now you look back at the service and say, okay, do I go to service now? Is it safe for me? Is this going to happen again? And Carly and I talked a bit about this when we talked about the Sri Lanka shooting
Mm-hmm.
because we were having the same idea. This happened Saturday night for us as we were going to bed, looking forward to getting up and going to church the next morning for Easter service.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you start to wonder: is my church going to be safe? I mean, I brought up the fact with her and I. I live in a small town in southern Wisconsin, and she lives in South Dakota in a slightly
Mm-hmm.
larger town than I live in. So, I mean, we would have been safe, but like in Chicago and New York City or in St. Louis or something like that, I'm sure that there were some people that were having a second thought about that. And now we've seen this happen in your faith as well, the same idea early on in the morning, right before we're starting to go into a high holiday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, back when these shootings first, started in the media, I mean, like the movie theater shootings, after that happened, I was paranoid to go to movie theaters. I mean, I would look around in the crowd and notice the people in the audience instead of focusing on the movie. So it really messed up my experience. And that's probably just my anxiety speaking, but I mean, it really has affected me. And media truly, it terrorizes you because it shows you these images again and again and again. And that's just all you think about when you go to these certain places, whether it be a synagogue, a movie theater, a mall, a school.
Well, I don't know if that's accidental and can be attributed to your anxiety because, in all honesty, I look at stuff like this and I think, well, that's exactly what the shooter intended was to make you
Exactly.
second guess all of this and not want to go to your synagogue or go to the movie theater. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a part of the reason that Shapiro has his rule of, well, we don't say the shooter's name or read the manifesto on air. I disagree with
Mm-hmm.
that entirely, by the way. We should all read all of the manifestos. And
Why do you agree with it?
I agree to the extent of not saying the name on the air because that's a good way to get famous, but I think we should all know the signs that we're looking for. That's self-preservation to me, to be able to know the signs of what we're looking for and possibly
Mm-hmm.
be able to identify a threat faster by knowing what we're looking for and knowing what that neighbor in our community thinks or might think or might want.
Mm-hmm.
If we see the manifesto, we have an idea of what's going on in the mind of one shooter and we can apply that to
Mm-hmm.
a future shooter.
That's true. And I can see it on both sides. I mean, yes, we know the warning signs now, but on the other side, think about all of the, people who do have mental illness, and who are seeing, these manifestos and, these plots by these other people. I think that might kind of help them make their own plots sometimes.
Well, the hard part about it is the shooter was supposedly radicalized on a website called 8chan, which I told you off, Mike, a little bit about this. I was in the Beauty and the Beta live stream chatting with some people, and they were talking about 4chan at the time, and I was
Mm-hmm.
just trolling. And I said, "Oh, I only think about 8chan," and then a few weeks later, I find out that 8chan is a real thing.
Yeah, he was posting anti-Semitic remarks on there.
Well, and from what I understand from hearing this and doing a little bit of reading on there, that's kind of the place for all of that, which
Really?
scares me.
Yeah, I mean, I've never explored that website. I've never typed that URL into, my browser before. So,
Well, do you like leaving your house?
do I like leaving my house?
Because if you do, I recommend that you don't open that.
Yeah, so for my anxiety, I don't think I should do it. And then I really won't want to go anywhere, and I will be on house arrest.
Self-imposed.
Yes.
Well, that's raised the question as well because there was some talk, a little bit of talk when this started out about getting sites like that shut down. I know there are a lot of people that want to see 4chan shut down, and that makes me laugh a little bit because a quick way to ruin your own life is to go after 4chan.
What is 4chan? Can you tell me a little bit about it? I'm not too familiar.
From what I've understood, and I've only looked at it a little bit, just based on the fact that it scares me a little bit itself. But from what I've seen, it's an anonymous message board for people to come through and organize and do things. But 4chaners, I don't want to be politically incorrect, but it's the only way I can think of to describe it. 4chan is weaponized autism.
Huh.
It's a bunch of people that can get together and they've used their combined powers of internet and knowledge of the internet they can find any piece of information they want. I'm a little afraid of the fact that I've said weaponized autism about them already because they're going to find where I live and dox me.
Oh, gosh.
And they're very good at it. They found Shia LaBeouf over cloud patterns when he was hiding out in his bunker right after the 2016 election.
Oh, my gosh.
Through cloud patterns. Through the cloud
Yeah,
pattern?
I guess that is kind of scaring me, so I can see why I will not visit that website.
And they're not necessarily hateful either. It seems like the hateful ones are relegated off onto 8chan, so it's not necessarily they hate any one particular ethnic group. I mean, the people are there that do, but for the most part, it's a fairly neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
They just find any information that you could want really, really quickly.
Okay.
To a level that's a little bit scary to me.
Well, I guess at least we can see, this shooter's motive. I guess he was definitely targeting Jewish people as he seemed to be anti-Semitic. But I'd definitely be interested in hearing about, his past. Because he was only, I believe, 19 years old.
Yes, he was. That is correct.
So, yeah. So I just kind of want to know, was he a troubled student in school? Things like that.
Well, I'm curious about that myself because while I was waiting for you to connect, I was actually reading a CNN article that had just talked to the family, and they were surprised by this. And I've looked at some of the like past shooters, like Dylan Roof in the theater and Nicholas Cruz in Florida, where there were obvious telltale signs of what was going on, no matter what anybody was saying about that. And I don't know, like you said, we don't know anything about the past of Mr. Ernest, but just looking at some of these other ones, I have to wonder, were you really surprised, or were you a doting parent that said that your child could never do anything wrong? But we don't know.
Yeah, there's no telling. I mean, sometimes people can hide things so well. They lead secret lives. I mean, we see it all the time. And their purpose is to not be found out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people go to extreme lengths, to hide their very deep, dark secrets.
Well, in the same vein of this, too, to move on just a little bit off of the California... Actually, before I get off of this topic, I do want to give a shout-out to the Border Patrol agent that was on site and armed at the time. The rabbi had asked him to keep himself armed at the time, and he was able to stop the situation. So a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy with a gun, and this could have been a whole lot worse if he hadn't been there. So as hard as it is to get a concealed carry permit in California, we should all think I don't know. I don't want to be insensitive, so I'll let you say it. But we should all give out a prayer of thanks to um, the fact that he was able to be in there and stop that. So
Oh, absolutely. I would feel safer if I knew that people around me were caring, honestly. It makes me feel better. Like even when I'm in a movie theater, I say to myself, I wonder how many of these people in the audience are caring right now. How many of these people could, protect everyone here in the theater? And I'm really hopeful that there are people in there.
no, that's a good thought to have too, because I remember when concealed carry first came into Wisconsin, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, well, this is just going to make the bar scene interesting." Well,
Mm-hmm.
people aren't supposed to be carrying in the bar, so
Ah,
that's
yes.
strike one. So they'll lose their CCW license as soon as they're found out about that.
Mm-hmm. But
But
yeah, I mean, the point is that the gun that this shooter used in California was legal. It
mhm,
was a legal AR-15 style gun.
yeah, he had it attached up, so it was California compliant.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that goes back to with the person that stopped the shooting. It was he was carrying as well. He was carrying legally, and for concealed carry especially, because you wouldn't want to have him out there flashing it all around. But with
Mm-hmm.
concealed carry, it's always interesting because you don't want to do something if you know that there's concealed carry going on, because you don't know
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be armed and who isn't.
Exactly.
Now in California, because it's so hard to get concealed carry, you're most likely not going to you're going to be running into a place and nobody else is going to be armed. But you just had that one person that surprised them, and oh, now this is over.
Mm-hmm.
Going back now, moving off of this topic here, there was another shooting this past week that happened in North Carolina, and this was
Yeah.
another news story that I was very surprised at the fact that fell out of the news almost immediately as soon it was over, and you have to wonder if the fact that it didn't fit the narrative once again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch or didn't keep the name written down. I should have written it down, but another young man,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
a student of the class came in with a handgun and started shooting. Now, this is not considered to be a mass shooting because less than 4 people were killed at the time. Uh,
Right.
I think there looks like everybody has been released from the hospital, so we pray for speedy recovery rather for all of them. But instantly, as soon as it all happened, I mean, your usual suspects like your David Hogg and the Democrat politicians were out there saying that this is going to be our call for immediate gun control as soon as it happens. And then this all fell apart. It fell out of the news. I heard it that one day and I never heard about it again.
I mean, there have been a lot of people online fighting for gun control recently. I don't know if it's because of these shootings or just because they enjoy doing that from time to time. But definitely gun control has been in the media recently.
Well, yeah, it's going to be any sort of topic as soon as we come into an election season, because that's as far as back as I can remember. There's always been a gun control agenda on the left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, for this one, yet again, going to school, it makes kids paranoid at colleges.
But what's interesting to me is the ones that don't fit the narrative, especially the ones that don't involve um, a black composite style rifle. They just fall out of the news almost immediately. The Texas shooting, we don't hear about that anymore. We heard about it for a week after it happened, and then it disappeared because the guy used a 38 handgun, and I think he had a shotgun with him as well, and it wasn't a composite style rifle. We heard about it for
Mm-hmm.
2 days, and we never heard about it again.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And it was also, I really don't even understand what this shooter's motive was or what he was doing. So I guess kids were giving a speech. It was
Mhm.
like their final week of class, and they were giving their final speech. And then all of a sudden, they saw this guy in their classroom pointing a gun at them. Like they don't even know how he got in there or what he was doing. It's very bizarre. It's just so weird how they find that classroom. Like, was he targeting it? It just seems random.
I was of the understanding that he was a member of that class, so I don't know if that plays into it at all. Let me look at something here quick.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I missed that, but I heard that he did go to that college, but he hasn't been going to classes recently. So maybe he was in that class, but he hasn't been in there recently.
Yeah, I'm just looking at an ABC News article real quick here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's saying that the motive is still unclear on all of this. So, I mean, we let me see. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. The chief has vowed. So yeah, nobody really knows anything about this yet at this point.
No.
So, but we do know that he used a handgun, and
Mm-hmm.
again, once the black composite aspect of it goes away, then the story goes away out of the news. So we may never know about this in the middle of the country unless we actually go actively seeking for it. But hopefully, these students and the families of the students at UNC will get some closure to that once the local news releases the motives once they find it.
Yeah, I really hope so. And yet again, in this college shooting, a student rushed at the gunman, to try to stop him.
Which is amazing. It's the act of selflessness. The lack of selflessness that goes into something like this is amazing. One of the things that I found interesting when I was reading for this, um, they were talking about generation lockdown and the fact that everybody is suddenly so prepared to go through an active shooter drill. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I was 14 when Columbine happened.
Uh-huh.
It was 10 days before my 15th birthday, actually. So,
Okay.
and I remember Jonesboro, but that was another one of the things. It came into the news and it kind of came back out. That was the first real big school shooting that I remember. But Columbine did change things, and it changed the way that we looked at a few things. And then we went for quite a while without another school shooting. We always talked about people coming back and shooting up the school, but it was quite a while again before we had a prominent one come through the news.
Well, we had them happening at other places. I mean, I don't know the timeline, but we had the movie theater
Yeah.
shootings. So those were big for a while.
And then Sandy Hook, I think, was the next really, really big one that
Hmm.
everybody paid attention to all across the country.
And then we had a lot of those, like the bombings, like the Boston Marathon
Hmm.
bombing. So people are using different weapons to create chaos. But still, again, that makes people scared to go to events. Like I was in Chicago recently at a St. Patrick's Day parade, and I honestly was feeling extremely uneasy. I mean, that crowd at the St. Patrick's Day parade was huge. You could not get out of that crowd. You were stuck. And it's like if there was a gunman, if there was a bomb, I don't know what people would have done. It would have been horrible.
Well, I applaud you for willingly going to Chicago. I'll give you a pat on the back
Just to see
because
Hamilton, it was worth it.
I don't know if I could do that personally. I do want to go and see the Sheds Aquarium, and it's only a couple hours from here, but I am really wary every time I go to Chicago because there's no reciprocity, so you can't really carry down in Illinois.
Right, right. Yeah,
You're,
so that would be the perfect place for someone to target
yeah.
because of all the gun laws there.
And the tourism because there's so many
Hmm.
people that are from out of state. I did drive just on a whim last year. I drove down to Chicago, just drove around the loop and came back. I was actually
Oh,
planning on stopping and going and walking around, but I couldn't
uh-huh.
find a place to park.
Yeah. Well, that's believable. It's pretty chaotic down there.
But I mean that lends to kind of what you were saying too. You're in the crowd. There's no way to get back out. I looked at the streets. I wouldn't want to be walking around down those streets when something happened.
Mm-mm.
If I didn't get killed outright by the shooter, I would get trampled by the people that were running away from it.
Exactly. It would be worse than Walmart on Black Friday. Much, much worse.
And then even trying to drive out. I mean, if something major was happening in Chicago, like somebody flew an airplane into that building, trying to get out on the loop, trying to get back out of there, I nothing major happened, and I sat on the freeway for 55 minutes, sat
Yep.
still, trying to get back out of there. So yeah, it's not just the walking crowd; it's the driving crowd. It's
Mhm.
And these people are just sitting ducks if something happens.
Exactly. And, I thank my lucky stars that nothing has happened to me yet, but it's bound to happen to someone someday. So you just got to be smart and you got to be aware.
And they say that Detroit is even worse. I don't know how far away from Detroit you are, but they say that that's even.
Yeah, I'm actually about 40 minutes away from Detroit. So I'm in a suburb of Detroit.
Okay. And is it.
Yeah. It's definitely getting better. Down in Detroit now, they're trying to revamp it and make it more touristy. So they have like Segway tours. I don't really know what they tour around, but there's Wayne State University, which is the main college campus down there. So that brings a lot of young people. It's very hipster, very trendy, retro. So yeah, just a lot of young people are moving down there to apartments and whatnot. So it's getting better. You just got to stay within the city with, all the stores and restaurants and you'll be fine.
An interesting side thought now that we actually sat back and talked a little bit about Chicago and Detroit now, and the fact that we look at like a UNC shooting and that makes the news for a little bit. It actually makes a blip on the news, or the synagogue shooting that made major news until it fell back out of the news again. And we see these mass shootings and people get shot up 20, 30 at a time, and the media panics about that. And something like that is, they call that a Tuesday in Detroit and Chicago, and nobody bats an eye over it.
Well, I mean, people aren't shooting people at schools every day in Detroit. That doesn't happen. It's more so like robbers, are robbing houses, or you get held up at a gas station. So it's more so people doing things at their own houses or in their neighborhoods. You don't so much see like the mass shootings.
Well, and the mass shootings that happen in these bigger cities, like a drive-by or something like that, they don't put those in the same category either. They consider it gang violence, and it has its own category, so they don't consider it to be a mass shooting so much.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's more of a cultural thing. I mean, people have less respect for each other typically in the inner city, and they're not as educated on how to use a gun safely. So accidents happen a lot.
Given the fact that Hogg and all of his friends came out and started talking about a solution right away and a gun confiscation, what do you think an appropriate solution would be? I mean, I've got my ready tweet whenever I see one of these people ask for a solution, but what do you see as any sort of solution for any of this? A solution for gun violence?
I would say, obviously, it goes back to mental health. We need to make, therapists, psychiatrists more available to people. It is very hard to get help, when people have substance abuse issues. I mean, I see it as a social worker. When you have mental health, substance abuse issues, it's very hard to get an appointment to get in and get assistance. So if this process was made easier, I mean, a lot of these government-run agencies are very slow at helping people. So again, privatization, that would be nice. I'm sure that would up the quality of services. And I don't think our guns should be taken away from us. We should be able to protect ourselves. And I just think, gun safety, promoting gun safety, teaching your children how to use guns appropriately, teaching those around you, just awareness.
Your answer was much more thoughtful than mine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You just have to respect each other, respect, guns.
My regular answer to that question is shoot back.
Well, yeah, self-defense. I think it definitely goes back to, morality. I mean, society, our morals are definitely, getting worse and worse. We're feeling more and more entitled.
That's for sure. Yeah. I think a lot of people were pointing out correctly, too, that you didn't see any of these back in the 40s and 50s and the 60s. And A lot of people have said the fact that a lot of this is devolving out of the fact that parents have stopped disciplining their kids, and I
Mhm.
can't help but wonder if they're right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because the government is now parenting for us. We've become so lazy. And so maybe if we just started caring about ourselves and others again, then these things wouldn't happen so much.
Well, and the discipline too. I mean, I was a bully target when I was in high school. I'll admit to that. If the thought, not, let's take the thought of it out of the. If I had ever taken a gun back to school and tried to right the wrong and do something about it, I would
Mhm.
be begging the police to take me away and put me in prison for the rest of my life. Because I would, if they took me to prison, I wouldn't have to deal with my parents.
Oh, because they'd be mad at you or
Anything that the government put down on me was going to be half the severity of what my parents would have put down on me.
right, right. Parents don't know how to discipline anymore. They just let their kids kind of, run free, do whatever they want. They don't teach their children morals anymore.
That's exactly what it is too.
Hmm.
Well, given the fact that we've talked a little bit about the control and the solution, I think that's a perfect time for us to use my awesome segue skills and talk about the people that do want to debate the gun control topic and try to bring this down onto a federal level. And that means that it is time for 2020 Watch.
Woo!
So, we've got a little bit of a story that popped up and popped back down as a hoax right away, but I think it bears repeating about 2020 and our good friend Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Wow, is
Out
that
of
how you say it?
that's
Buttigieg?
that is what they tell me is the official way to say it.
Oh, that's awesome. I've always said butt gig, but I'm sure that that Buttigieg is much, much better.
Given the fact that he's open and in a small town, I'm sure he's heard that one before.
Is that a French
I
word?
think so.
Buttigieg?
I think it's
Yeah, it sounds very French because I spoke French during my schooling, so sounds familiar to me.
well, a young man about 21 years old came out and said that Mayor Pete came out and sexually assaulted him. And
Yeah, the
what
guy the guy was from Michigan. That's
Mhm.
the funny part.
And I immediately turned around and put that in the show notes as soon as I saw that because I thought this was going to be a bigger story. And then it wasn't.
Womp womp.
As we found out that this was a hoax, an online hoaxer actually went out and generated this story to try and discredit Buttigieg.
Hmm.
So that's still a little bit funny, but you said this guy was from Michigan, so tell us a little bit about what you know of this.
Well, I know this man is openly gay as well, and he actually was his identity was stolen. That's what I believe.
Hmm.
So I guess Trump supporters stole his identity and made a fake Twitter account and posted this whole, Me Too sexual assault tweet. Is that what you understand to be true as well?
I thought the guy that put the name out there was actually at the bottom of this. I guess I didn't make the connection with the stolen identity. That adds an entirely different twist to the whole thing if it did.
Because it was Wool, wasn't it? The Wool family
Yep.
that was behind this.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So apparently this guy who supposedly was sexually assaulted, he talked to these political people, and then that's when these political people just took advantage of him and made this a thing. So I don't know if the guy from Michigan is really to blame. I think it's more the Wool
Yeah, and
family.
the Wolf family is known for being tricksters too and doing things like this. So that wouldn't be out of the realm of ordinary, but it's interesting to me to see that the fact that this is the first place that people are going back to, especially with as many Democrats that did get embroiled in the Me Too movement when they were trying to levy everything against Republicans, especially our Republican president.
Hmm.
Because that was the first thing that I said when I saw it is nobody safe?
Oh yeah, nobody's safe.
And
But
then
it's like is Buttigieg, is he that much of a threat to Trump? I mean, how is he even polling? I don't. I didn't know he's that popular.
I think he's in the zero range right now, but he's I know he's taken some of the thunder out of Beto, and he's made some statements that have brought him up into the polls, and made him somebody that's been a household name. Which,
Hmm.
when I first started the show and I had my friend Emily on, he was already talking about doing so back at the time, and she had pointed out the fact that we had the first openly gay person that was running for president, and
Hmm.
we didn't have a direct understanding of how to pronounce his name yet. So it's interesting. I was a little surprised when I first saw his name come up in a sexual assault allegation. That blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he's married, he has a husband, so I don't, I mean, obviously he could have cheated on his husband with someone else, but
Oh yeah, that's a fair sport in politics these days.
exactly. Yeah. So I just don't know. I was trying to figure out if you could actually get someone in trouble for doing something like that. If somebody accuses you falsely of sexually assaulting them, could they get in trouble?
The way I understand most state laws currently, know that there's no penalty for that because they're afraid that girls won't come forward if somebody gets in trouble for doing a false
Hmm.
accusation. But I know that's been a talking point on the right for quite a while, ever since like the Duke lacrosse thing and many other situations where it came out that a person got acquitted years later because it turned out the allegation was false and the girl walked away with nothing. So that is
Hmm.
something that the hardcore mega crowd is trying to bring up. I don't know how I feel about that idea though.
I mean, it's like just think about if somebody accused you, of sexually assaulting them, at your job or something. I mean, that could destroy your career.
Or conversely, if somebody came back and said that about a certain bespectacled radio host or a podcast host, and how quickly I'd be thrown off the air.
Hmm.
I mean, that is
Exactly.
a life ruiner,
Right.
no matter which way it
So,
goes.
but I guess it's just like spreading a rumor. Is gossip illegal? How far can gossip go?
It can go a long way in quite a hurry.
Hmm. I mean, look at the tabloids, the magazines about the celebrities. They're spreading crap all the time about them. A lot of it's not true. Do those people get in trouble? No. It's freedom of speech, right? You can say whatever you want.
Wait, are you trying to tell me that the Bat Boy isn't real?
Who isn't real?
The Bat Boy?
Who's that?
It's a National Enquirer. Was it?
Oh, the National Enquirer.
No, it wasn't National Enquirer. It was Weekly World News. It's a story that's been going on since the middle of the 90s.
Okay.
He's run for
Yeah,
president a
so
few times, according to Weekly World News.
yeah, so things like that. It's like where do you draw the line? So as far as I know, I don't think anybody is being prosecuted for this false allegation.
It'd be interesting to see if somebody got a prosecution, whether it's for the allegation itself or, as you had said, the stolen identity, the imitating
Hmm.
somebody. I wouldn't mind
Hmm.
seeing that because you always should know who you're talking to, and I don't know how much the government I want involved in that, but I
Hmm.
mean, you're doing something that would directly put harm to somebody else, so maybe we have a case for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely need to look more into that.
Well, we've got the story out of the way, so now it's time for me to pick your brain on what you think about some of these things.
Oh boy.
So
Okay.
we're looking at 2020. We're looking at a clown car of a packed field.
Oh boy.
We've got
Hmm.
creepy Joe Biden in, who is a Me Too or a walking Me Too moment.
I love all of his memes. I'm guilty. I post the memes.
We've got Kamala Harris out there who wants to badger anybody who talks about anything and won't let them answer a question or give anything else. We've got the Native American Princess Warren. We've got Beto O'Rourke, the missing fourth member of Nirvana. So I've got a series of questions about this packed field.
Uh-huh.
Your opinion, first off, this is all gets to be your opinion. Your opinion. Who makes it to the end of the Democrat primaries?
My initial gut is Biden.
Defend.
You said defend that?
Yes.
I think obviously he was our vice president, so people know him. They already kind of know what he's about. So there's that trust there already that he's not going to like ruin our world, at least in my mind.
Okay.
It's like I don't think he could make things too horrifying because we've already seen him in office before.
Oh, don't issue them a
Um,
challenge.
but yeah, I think it's just he's got the name recognition. People already trust him. So I'd say that's the main reason why.
Okay. That's a good point there. Um, on a serious note, because I'm going to ask this question two different ways. So, serious side, which Democrat do you want to see make it to the end?
My gut reaction is Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
Um, I do have some respect for her. I mean, obviously, she believes in universal health care, so I don't agree with her on that. But, she wants to end the wars. So that's where, obviously we see eye to eye. I know that she's for ending the drug war as well. So, I'm definitely for that. She seems genuine. So I definitely have more trust for her naturally.
And now I'm going to ask the same question again, but with a twist.
Mm-hmm.
For sheer entertainment value, who do you want to see make it to the end?
Gut reaction again. Beto O'Rourke.
Okay.
I want to see him stand on as many objects as possible.
Okay. I have seen your video about the Declaration of Independence, so I can understand that entirely.
Yes. I just think he's so funny. I know during his last campaign, I know he did like a 24-hour live stream, and I know that got a lot of popularity. So, I mean, he has very creative ideas. They go viral. He's a smart guy, but I would not trust him in office. He'd be a great comedian. I would go to his show and laugh.
Yeah, that's entertaining. I don't think that Beto has the wherewithal to make it to the end. That's part of the problem, and it definitely would be entertaining to see. But he failed against Ted Cruz in Texas, who failed against Trump. So I think a lot of people understand the fact that he's not going to get through the general if they bring him out to the end. But yes, that would be an entertaining one to watch, definitely.
Yeah. And obviously, Elizabeth Warren, I love to laugh at jokes about her. But, she's right up there with the memes of Biden.
It's interesting that you bring up Biden as the thought that the most interesting person to make it, or most likely person to make it to the end, because I don't think he is.
Who do you think is?
It's hard for me to say this for sure. Occasionally, I'll go listen to podcasts from the other side, and usually my main method of torture is Pod Save America, and that's run by two former Obama staffers. So, listening to that, I kind of have an idea of what the top wants. And the last time I listened to that, they were talking a lot about Elizabeth Warren, and they were talking very highly of her, which they seem to be the only Democrats in America that are talking highly of her at this point. I come from a union family, and I was talking to my mom about this, and I mean, I was a little surprised by the very harsh words that were coming out of my mom's mouth about Elizabeth Warren. So it seems like the people on the ground, especially on the union side, don't want to see her make that out. But I almost feel like after listening to Pod Save America that the Democrat Party's already coronated her. Now, how they'll make that work without the superdelegates, we have no idea. But I think they already have her decided as going up against Trump, which...
Oh, wow. I don't think she'd have a chance against Trump.
I don't think she'd have a chance against the primary field.
Yeah, I think Biden, Bernie Sanders, he definitely has a chance.
See, I don't know if Biden has a chance to make it through just because of primary politics. I think he has the best platform out there to pull the Union Democrats back over from the Trump side and make them vote Democrat again. But he is running a neoliberal, union friendly campaign against a lot of people who are open and avowed socialists.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be what the younger voting bloc wants.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think that he would actually possibly stand a chance in the general. It's just a matter of getting him to the end, which I don't see happening.
I think either way, I mean, Trump is going to win, in my opinion, whether I want him to or not. I think it's going to happen.
As far as who I want to see go to the end on a serious note, I do say I'll say right out I want to see Biden make it on a serious note because
Oh, really?
I kind of want to. I think he's got the best platform, and I think that the administration's campaign team is actually
Mm-hmm.
going to have to step up and defend their platform in order to try and keep the voters that would normally jump back and forth. It's going to come down as a matter of swing voters,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Biden would keep Trump the most honest
Hmm.
because he can
Wow.
hammer anybody else out.
Uh-huh. Well, we shall see. Yeah, I can definitely see Biden and Trump going head to head. I can see that happening.
And though it hasn't changed from last week, the entertainment candidate that I want to see get to the end is exactly the same as I said to Carly last week, Kamala Harris,
Oh,
the
okay.
senator who has never run against a Republican.
Yeah, I was so shocked that in California, because my sister lives in California, there are some elections where there's no Republicans running
Well,
for a
what
certain seat.
Well, they're usually Republicans that run for a certain seat, but they're so far down in the list that they don't make it because they have a stacked primary system. I think is what they call it, where it's you go into your primary booth and you vote for whoever you want to vote for, and the top two candidates that get the votes are the ones that appear on
Hmm.
the ticket for
Hmm.
the general.
Right, right. That is right. And sometimes, it's not a Republican and a Democrat, it's two Democrats running. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the race during the primary season for the Senate, and I looked at Feinstein's seat, and excuse me, there were three or four Republicans down the list
Hmm.
during the primary race, but of course they didn't make it to the end because it was Feinstein at the top, and was it? No, it wasn't Navarro. He's a Republican. There was another Democrat that was sitting right below her. So, and that's the same thing when Kamala made it to the top because she ran for the Senate against another Democrat.
Hmm.
So yeah, just to see somebody who's never run against a Republican actually have to sit down and debate, maybe not a Republican, but a populist at the top. Because I
Hmm.
don't consider Trump to be a Republican.
What do you consider him to be?
He's a lifelong Democrat, but he's got the populist and the small government tendencies that have made him appeal to the right side where he would have been thrown out of the left side.
Hmm. So you think he's pretty much a Democrat then?
He's a neoliberal, is what he is, and in the
Hmm.
Progressive Party, he would have never made it. Part of the same thing that I'm saying about Biden and him not making it to the end.
Yeah. I mean, I think he has some libertarian tendencies in him. He's obviously a businessman,
Hmm.
so he probably understands economics. He probably has to, in
Oh,
order to be so successful.
maybe he could teach Cortez.
Oh gosh. Oh dear. She if she ever ran for president, that would be really funny.
I want to step because we're actually running up against the clock here. I want to step back into 2020 politics, and I know you had talked about Gary Johnson a bit in your intro,
Yeah.
and this is the first time I'm actually comfortable bringing this up because it's actually looks like it's going to happen. On the other side now, it looks like Weld is actually going to get in and try and primary the president, which he has no shot of doing because
Right.
Wilson was the last incumbent that got primaried out.
Hmm.
So where do you see that going? Especially again, given your history with Johnson.
Yeah, honestly, I never trusted Bill Weld. I never have thought he's a real libertarian.
I
So he
don't think Gary
ruined,
Johnson's a real libertarian either, but
right. I mean, both of them together, they just ruined that 2016 election. I mean, they screwed over Austin Peterson, obviously. Gary Johnson threw the pistol in the trash. So yeah, I lost a lot of respect for Gary Johnson and Bill Weld at that time. But I would rather have, you know, Tulsi Gabbard win compared to Bill Weld any day.
do you think he's going to hold the administration responsible, accountable, or possibly have them step up their game, or is he virtuous signaling at this point?
I mean, I don't really know much about the guy. I really don't hear him talk very much. So I'm sure he'll kind of ruffle some feathers a little bit and, mix the pot. But I really don't know how much impact he's going to have.
I do like the idea of people jumping in and trying to primary the incumbent. Again,
Yeah.
I know that it's not going to go anywhere. We all know that's not going to go anywhere. But the other side of it, like I said before, it keeps the incumbent honest. It
Mm-hmm.
it makes sure that they can stand behind their principles rather than just getting the free ticket up to the top. And I know like Kasich was planning on primarying too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's good. More discussion is good.
Mm-hmm.
Challenging somebody is good. So I'm completely supportive of it. But in the end, will the outcome change because of it? I don't think so.
Well, we're going to move along here because we've got some pretty heavy topics here to get through.
Okay.
Once again, we're going on to foreign policy, which I don't do a lot of on this show, but the Venezuelans started to rise up against their government. Some of the military now has moved along to the side of Juan Guaido. The people of Venezuela are
Mm-hmm.
supporting Juan Guaido. Our country considers Juan to be the rightful president of the country, and Nicolas Maduro is just holding onto a seat that doesn't belong to him. He has not earned or whatnot, and the people rose up. Now we saw the horrific image of the tank running the people over in the streets, which
Mm-hmm.
is a military action that I do fear that if the socialists of this country come into power, will uh, take the same actions and the same steps to, but especially with your tendencies towards libertarianism. What do you see when you see something like this, with the people rising up against the socialist regime, especially if they're supporting another open socialist?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's like a revolution. It's what I think of when I think of revolution. One day if our government got really bad, I would expect that we rise up, with guns in hand.
Okay, when do we
And
start rising up?
yeah, I guess you can say, where is that line? When is too much too much?
I apologize, I shouldn't have
I guess
interrupted
I
there.
guess the day that they come knocking on our doors to take our guns will definitely be one of the days that people will
Absolutely.
rise up. Um,
Absolutely.
it's when the government is literally on your doorstep. That's when you're ready to rise up to protect your own rights because it's there in front of you. So, in terms of Venezuela, I mean, they're in such a mess. I actually was watching during my lunch break on CNN of all channels because that's what was on the television in my cafeteria. But I did see that tank running over, the people. And then all of a sudden, CNN, the reporter said, now the Venezuelan government just shut off, our newscast. Apparently the government like shut down the news there.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was very disturbing. I mean, I can't imagine that happening, in our modern world here in America. It is just,
I can't. I can't believe the fact that it's happening in the modern world anywhere, to be completely honest. Especially
mm-hmm,
with internet technology, I mean, the people down there understand what it's like to be free. I'm sure that they're getting
mm-hmm.
bootleg episodes of 90210 right now. And I'm talking to the one from the 90s, not the one that they just rebooted. So they understand the concept of freedom and what things look like in the rest of the world, but
Hmm.
they're eating rabbits that are cooked over garbage fires right now because the money ran out.
Yeah, yeah. And it's because of these social welfare programs that were being implemented, and it put the country deep and deep into debt. They couldn't get out of it. Inflation skyrocketed. That's how it happens.
It
That's
is.
why we cannot allow socialism to take over here in America. It's the
Oh,
road to serfdom.
oh, but it's not real socialism now. Even though it was when Sanders was praising it when they were still running off the bank account of capitals, which is interesting to me too because I'm reading a book in the Captivating History series about the Bolshevik Revolution right now.
Hmm.
And Lenin's first idea when he was going to implement Marxism into Russia and the Soviet Union was that they were going to have a few years of they were going to get the Tsar out, and they were going to have a few years of unrestricted capitalism at the time to build up the bankroll that they could use to fund the social programs that they were going to use when they took the government over in the means of production.
Hmm.
And I see that as being a part of what happened in Venezuela too. They got big, they got a bunch of money flowing through in capitalism because of the oil, and of course they've got the oil boom and the
Yeah.
money went out of that.
Yes.
But I mean, you see how quickly the money runs out, even no matter how big you build your bankroll,
Yeah, absolutely.
and you can't.
I mean,
Go
oh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't know how they're going to get out of this. It is such a mess. It's going to take years and years and years.
I honestly could see a neighboring country annex them at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things is the U.S. going to intervene? I know, people have been talking about that.
Well, and I wanted to bring that up too. I put that in the show notes because you are right. Many of the people in the Department of Defense, the Secretary of State, have talked about an intervention into Venezuela. I believe Mattis said that all options are on the table, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I was listening to Sticks this morning, and he actually kind of hit it right on the head because you don't go out and say some options are on the table because then
Hmm.
your opponents know what to expect. You do have to come out and say all options are on the table.
Right.
But
You can't let them know your game plan.
I do feel like there are people in this country that do want to see an intervention in Venezuela, especially some of the oil barons, because the country is so rich in oil still.
Hmm.
But that is part of
Yeah,
the
I
reason
mean,
they're in the mess that they're in the first place, is because the country is so rich in oil.
I obviously, as a libertarian, I don't believe we should be meddling in other people's affairs. We need to fix our own issues here first. We are very much in debt.
Yes, we are. It's something I can't believe that nobody's been talking about as we've gone along in this country, and we had all three branches of the government conservative for a while. Hey, let's get this paid down.
Yeah,
Nope,
exactly.
nope, it'll tick back up for a little while.
So I really, really hope we do not intervene. We just need to keep leading by example. Just keep being free here in the US and show people the way.
So, are you for or against the fact that we do have troops stationed in Colombia right now? Colombia being one of our allies.
I don't think we need to be anywhere where there's no war, personally. No war where the Congress has declared war.
That's understandable. I guess the idea behind having the troops in Colombia is to defend in case the civil war breaks out in Venezuela, and it spills over onto our allies, who are at this point a developing nation. But that goes back into the idea of nation building, which I know a lot of people are against and a lot of people are on the fence about. And part of the reason
Yeah.
that they're talking about intervention, by the way, in Venezuela as well, is nation building, because you said it's going to take years before they get back to a normal state over there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really don't think we should be giving any money to them to help them. You know, just bring our troops home. We got to still bring them home from the Middle East. We shouldn't be sending them out to other places now.
Well, I say a prayer for the people over in Venezuela. I hope that they can pull out of that or find shelter in another country that'll take them as the government of Venezuela sorts out its problems. Let's move,
Absolutely.
let's move on to
I,
this last topic here. You had something to say on Venezuela, so I don't want to interrupt you on that.
oh, I was just saying, I wish them the best, and I hope that they continue fighting for their freedoms. I can only hope that.
Well, let's now move on to the big news of the week on our domestic side. William Barr went through and testified in front of the Senate. I put out a little bit of a highlight reel of it yesterday. Well, Sunday, because for everybody else other than you and I, this is Tuesday.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I put out a video about this on Sunday talking about the highlight reel, and there were some really disturbing ideas that were coming from the senators that were grilling William Barr, and then Ted Cruz turned around and was the star of the day, and Lindsey Graham was his runner-up on the star of the day as far as defending William Barr. There seemed to be a lot of people in the Senate and a lot of people in the House as well who are very angry with William Barr right now for the fact of the Mueller report and
Mm-hmm.
just general his position as the Attorney General. People say that he was handpicked. People say that it was improper. People say he should be recusing himself from everything. Before we go into the hearings at all, where do you stand on William Barr himself?
I mean, I don't know too much about his background. He seems like a shady character, as do a lot of these people in this whole Mueller report issue. Um, I don't know. I don't really trust him, but I don't think we should ask for him to resign or anything like that.
It is interesting to me because Barr has been the Attorney General before. I didn't realize that when he was first confirmed. I actually found that
Hmm.
out just a couple
Yes,
weeks
during
ago.
the George W. Bush or H.W. Bush.
Hmm. Yeah, he was
Yes.
AG then too. So, I mean, this is a person that these people knew, loved, trusted. They confirmed him in the Senate, which thank God for the nuclear option. Otherwise, we would have had that draw out again. It would have
Hmm.
been Kavanaugh 2.0 at that point.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think that he was handpicked for the fact that he wasn't going to prosecute the president. I don't think the president would have done that. If President Trump had planned on doing that, he would have fired Mueller from the beginning, which was completely within his purview.
Hmm.
He could have done that at any time throughout the investigation if he thought it was a real witch hunt or not, and he chose not to do that. So I don't think Barr was there for the reason that his opponents think that he was there for. Now, as far as whether or not he should be, I don't know enough about his record, about where he stood as the prosecutor of this country. I'd like to look some more into that and see, but the focus on the hearings was his position on whether or not the president could be indicted and his position on where he fell on the Mueller report, which he came into at the tail end. So he went before the Senate. We talked a little bit about Kamala Harris's line of questioning for him, which I can't stand that woman. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be an objective journalist, but God, I hate that woman.
It's okay.
And you said that you actually saw that line of questioning specifically. What was your takeaway from that? Now that we're
Well,
talking
it
about
was
Barr
about
himself.
her questioning Barr about Rod Rosenstein,
Hmm.
and she was just like, was he cleared to participate? So she was just very concerned how he was cleared to participate.
94 to
Given
6,
his
by the way.
what's that?
94 to 6, by the way. He was cleared to participate.
Right, right. So she was just that's pretty much the clip that I saw was just her nabbing him, continuing to ask him over and over about that.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting idea because the first part of the line of questioning was, of course, Harris was demanding A.G. Barr to know why he didn't recuse himself from the investigation. And again, he
Hmm.
came in right at the end of it. But of course, because he was handpicked by the president, he was supposed to be conflicted about that. It was supposed to be a conflict of interest for him,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't see.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of them were upset about that, the edited version of the report coming out. They didn't want it to be edited.
But it wasn't edited. That's the problem. It all it did was blank out the classified information that the American people didn't have the security clearance to see, and the names of the people who were being investigated that were innocent because of the Fourth and the Fifth Amendment, those pesky things. And I will add, somebody that I work with pointed this out to me too, that the laws that made it illegal for us to get the full report
Mm-hmm.
were put in place by the Democrats during the Starr investigation.
Oh, hmm. Interesting.
The reason that they had to get the redacted report is the fact that they passed a law back in the 90s while Republicans were investigating Clinton.
Mm-hmm. Aha. So they kind of made their own problem.
Yeah. And they can't undo it right now because they don't have the majority on the Senate to do so.
Uh-huh.
Nancy can throw as many bills out there as she can, and they're not going to make it past the Senate.
That is true.
A couple of the other highlights that I saw, Amy Klobuchar had a line of questioning that almost was productive. Almost.
How so? How so?
Well, Amy Klobuchar actually led with a series of questions as to whether or not Barr would be in support of changing some of the laws that we have on the books to have backups for the, let me rephrase that, to have required backups for in case something like this were to ever happen in the election again, whether real or fake, because there's still the idea that the Russians hacked voting machines, which are not connected to the internet at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the election process is over on your side of the pond, but I know over here, every district that I've ever voted in Wisconsin has a voting machine. It doesn't have an electronic touchscreen one like so many of the ones that we see. I do fill out a paper ballot for everything that I do.
Yeah,
No
I do paper. I do paper ballots too. Yeah.
I've never
Fill in
seen.
the little bubble.
Yeah, I've never seen an electric voting machine.
I'd actually be kind of nervous to use one of those. I feel like a lot of mistakes could happen on that. If you accidentally click the wrong button and you're like, oh
Or there are a lot of people out there that, and that was the tinfoil out there that said that, okay, if you touched one candidate, it automatically voted for the other one too.
no. Exactly. Yes, we know how often computer glitches happen.
Glitches?
So,
Glitches, is that where you want to go with that?
Mm-hmm.
Not malicious programming or anything?
Well, kind of hard to tell which is which, but let's just say glitches, yeah.
I can go over to the kitchen right there and grab my roll of tinfoil. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, going back onto electric voting machines, I mean, that was part of the problem that so many of the supporters of Stacey Abrams in Georgia had to talk about too, because all the voting machines were down and nobody could go and vote, and this is all illegitimate, and many people were disenfranchised because they had to go to work because the voting machines were down. And
Right.
I guess Klobuchar has a plan in place in which she wants to make it mandatory for a voting district to have enough paper ballots to cover everybody in their district, plus probably like 10% for walk-ins and same-day registrations. And I'm okay with that idea, to be completely honest. I mean, any backup that you can have to make sure that an election is free and fair, or if you have glitches going on, just the option to go and fill out that paper ballot, I'm in favor of. And
Oh, absolutely.
that was the start of the discussion, was just talking about getting the AG's office on board to supporting that and having the executive branch sign it into law. This is all good things. And then it turned accusatory. And now we're going...
Always does.
Yeah, now we're towards the end of the line of questioning. We're sitting back and talking about the Russian Facebook ads and how much money they dumped into everything and how it affected the election. And I said in my video that if that's all it takes to influence an election, because it was really a small amount of number, I'm going to go drop $100 in Madison and make sure that no Democrat ever gets elected again. Where do you see that whole thing with the Facebook ads? And completely honestly, because that's the common theme that keeps coming up when they talk about these kinds of things.
What do you mean about the Facebook ads in particular?
Well, that seems to be the thing that turned the election entirely. If you listen to the Democrat narrative,
Hmm.
a few Kremlin agents went out and bought Facebook ads, and it turned the votes of hundreds of thousands of people in Middle America.
I mean, I believe it. Our society is run by, marketing ads pretty much because that's all we see, and we're on Facebook all the time. So I could see people being swayed by them.
I don't I don't think it has much of an impact as a lot of people thought it did either.
I mean, I haven't really seen what the ads exactly said. So, like, what are some of the things they actually said?
I don't remember seeing any of the ads.
Yeah,
That's the
because
thing.
they never targeted me, I guess.
Yeah, I was using Facebook still at the time. I don't use it anymore. Well, just a little bit here and there for marketing my videos, but I don't go on and scroll the feeds anymore. So
Right.
I did at the time. I would have seen these ads. I saw no ads.
No. Yeah. So honestly, it wasn't a problem for me, but maybe for people who are, less woke than we are, maybe they saw them.
One of the most interesting lines of questioning that I saw when I was going through and researching for the video that I did came from Democrat Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, who spent 60% of her allotted time in questioning, laying down a monologue that was completely accusing of the Attorney General, telling him how he should be resigning, telling him what he did wrong or what she thought that he did wrong. It was a very sharp pointed speech that had no questions involved into it,
Mm-hmm.
which I was to the understanding this was supposed to be Barr's testimony, not Hirono's testimony. But when you spend 60% of 8 minutes just laying that down, there's not a lot of room for any more questions after that.
Right.
But interestingly enough, in the last 3 minutes of her speech, she spent some time talking about what it was that the president should the president be doing things or not. Not necessarily if it was criminal or not. She brought up a lot of ethical ideas of what the president, what he did, what he didn't do, especially as going around the Mueller report. Asked him if he should be firing people and shouldn't be firing people, whether or not it was ethical for Barr to be anything. And Barr kept deflecting and saying that if Mazie wanted to bring forward something criminal for questioning, he'd be happy to answer that, but he was not in a position to talk about the ethics of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lindsey Graham stepped up at the very end of that speech and laid down the law, saying that how did he put that? I wish that I had figured out how to do video on it. I have not figured out how to do video on my podcast yet. I'm working on that right now. But
Ah, yes.
he did lay down the law and start yelling back at Hirono and the process of how bad the process is and how this is essentially just another witch hunt. That if
Mm-hmm.
we're just going to sit down and lay accusations, we're not going to get anywhere. But if we want to sit down and ask some questions and try and figure out what happened, we might have some progress. And I mean, Graham was kind of
Right.
the star of that whole line of questioning, no matter what Hirono did.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is like a witch hunt, exactly. We love pointing fingers, blaming people, telling them to get out.
Trying to
It
find the
seems,
person to blame.
it seems to be a trend. I mean, we do that in government all the time.
And then Ted Cruz jumped up towards the end of all of this and spent his entire line of questioning as well, basically making a monologue. He was praising A.G. Barr for his service to the country, the fact that he had so many years of flawless service to the country, because he hasn't just been the Attorney General twice. He's been working with the executive branch before of various different presidencies. He's been in the Department of Justice for years, and
Hmm.
he got a glowing recommendation and praise from Senator Ted Cruz throughout throughout all of these people trying to throw him under the bus. That was a shining star in that, and I was very appreciative of the fact that he was able to do that.
Hmm.
I don't know if the beard changed Ted Cruz or if it was the fact that he lost out to Trump and he had to sit and change his entire strategy, but he's changed a lot from when I first started following him.
He's matured.
He has. Before we jump out here, because we're running up against the clock here, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that Barr was supposed to testify in front of the House, but he chose not to. Now, he
Right.
wasn't subpoenaed to talk in front of either House. This actually had been a plan that had been in place for a couple weeks before, so he was doing all of this voluntarily. But he chose at the last minute to cancel his appearance in front of the House.
Hmm.
And Representative Cohen from Tennessee had an interesting reaction to that, as most people on the news saw. Cohen went up and sat on or at the table that Barr was supposed to be testifying from, with a
Yep.
bucket of KFC at 9 in the morning, which I don't know how much he bribed the good people at KFC to be open at 9 in the morning.
Oh, I remember. I think his intern got it the night before, I believe. I
Gross.
was reading something about that, and there was something about the timing of it all. So yeah, there was some strategy in there.
Well, that's gross. Have you ever had KFC chicken the morning after?
I like leftovers. I'm a vegetarian now, but I used to eat KFC. But I'm a fan of leftovers, so I'm okay with it.
So Cohen sat at the table and ate KFC chicken. He had a plastic figurine of a chicken that was sitting up next to him.
Oh my
And he
God.
went back out to the press afterwards and he outright called Barr a chicken for the fact that he would not go up and
Right.
testify in front of the Senate. And I made the joke on my solo video. I couldn't claim it. I gave credit where credit was due because Ben Shapiro brought up one of the funniest things that I heard all week on this whole
Yeah.
situation, and that was because that Representative Cohen has become Needles from Back to the Future 2.
I'm not really into Back to the Future, so.
Are you Chicken McFly?
Oh, oh my gosh.
That's actually my favorite movie. So when I heard him say that, when he said Needles, I knew exactly where he was going. And I was at work. I started laughing out loud when I heard that because it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard.
I mean, I think just him eating the chicken and it's just ridiculous. Could we ever see something like this happening in 1776, where people are like eating chicken? I don't know. Were they that silly back then?
Alexander Hamilton shot Aaron Burr.
That is true. That is
I
very true.
I think we've kind of tamed since 1776, to be completely honest.
I would prefer chicken to, shooting each other, but.
The last point I want to get onto here is the Swalwell tweet, which I don't have an image of that ready. But Swalwell used his power of Twitter and the fact that he does have an army of people that are in support of him because he stands against guns right now, to say that it is time to impeach William Barr, which was an interesting concept to me because Pelosi said that there was not going to be any sort of impeachment, but now the representatives want to impeach their way up to the top rather than starting at the top and going
Hmm.
down.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many people going after Barr. I really don't know what will come out of all of this. I wouldn't be surprised if, he ends up, putting in a resignation at some point.
I don't know if he's going to be completely honest. Where do you stand on the tinfoil idea that they're going after him so hard because he brought up the idea of opening an investigation against Democrats, which was something that Harris brought up in her line of questioning?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it.
Because one of the first questions that she asked in her line of questioning was, had anybody ever asked him to open up an investigation?
Mm-hmm.
against anybody. That was a perjury
Yeah.
trap if I ever heard one. And I think that's a part of the reason that he didn't go in front of the House either, was because, I mean, after sitting and listening to the former California prosecutor trying to trap the guy in a perjury trap, I mean, who knows what they've got sitting and waiting for him impromptu over at the House of Representatives. I think it was the wisest decision he made in his career to not go over there right away.
Yeah, it's just sad how people are just going against each other. It's a horrible example to show our children. Is this really how we should be communicating to each other?
I don't know. I think it does hold the government to a level of accountability. And I mean, we're seeing things that we didn't see 10 years ago in the government. Maybe not 10 years, 5 years ago in the government. We didn't see this process playing out before.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I tried to look at when I was looking up this hearing, and I couldn't find it on the internet anywhere, was what congressional hearings took place under Obama, because we never saw them.
Hmm.
We never heard
That's
about them.
interesting.
Yeah. The news never covered anything like that. I'm sure they did it. I'm sure they called people up to the Hill all the time, especially as often as they
Huh.
call people up there now.
But we've seen a lot of hearings during the, Trump administration here.
Yeah, I mean, Zuckerberg, Barr, Kavanaugh, obviously, but that was a
Mm-hmm.
required hearing. They're doing hearings left and right now, but I mean,
Right.
did they do this before? There's a level of transparency that comes out of it that I am okay with. One of the credits that I've cited with the Trump administration, and I've been on the fence with that administration since it started. I like it one day, I don't like it the next day, but one of the things I've consistently found is we do have more transparency, whether it's intended or not, out of the Trump administration than we've had out of any other administration that I can remember, because the news is so eager to go and try and find anything that they can turn around and use against him.
Mm-hmm. And too, I mean, Trump tweets all the time. He tells us what's going on. He tells us what's on his mind. That's transparency right there. We hear it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
He tells us what's on his mind, sometimes to a fault.
Right. But I mean, we kind of know where his mind is at day in, day out. He tells us.
Well, that's all that I've got on that. I know we're running a little bit longer than I had scheduled for, so what do you say that we close this, read the outro, and get the hell out of here?
Sure.
So, because so much of politics is divisive and there's so much bad news that we talk about, people run people over with tanks, there are constant fights in the Congress, and politics is just generally a negative thing. We like to close out with something positive. And since the guest is the most important part of the show, this goes to the guest. So tell
Oh,
us
thank
about a
you.
hobby that you have that has nothing to do with politics or any sort of work that you do. It could be an album that you're listening to, a video game that you've tried out, or something that you really enjoy that has nothing to do with the political atmosphere we have today.
Well, I really enjoy gardening and beekeeping. They kind of go hand in hand. I have a little patio garden. Well, I have a plant right here. It's a strawberry mint plant, and it smells really good. But yeah. So even during the winter, I bring my plants inside and I take care of them because I live in Michigan. So that's what I do just to kind of relax. I love watching things grow. I love being in nature.
It is a relaxing hobby. We talked about it on Twitter. I actually do a little bit of gardening myself,
Yeah.
but my garden eats more meat than most Democrats do.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yours is the like the fly traps and things.
I have fly traps. Most of what I have is Cape Sundews, but that's just because they multiply so damn fast. You can't keep up with them.
Yeah, you have a very cool garden. I definitely am intrigued by your plants.
Perhaps I'll have to put something in a box and send it over across the pond. Put it on the
That would
ferry
be
and send
really
it over.
cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I like exotic plants.
Well, the common Venus flytrap is the least exotic out of my garden because it only grows in one place in the country, and that is right in North Carolina. I'm sorry, it
Really?
only grows in one place in the world, and that's in North Carolina.
I didn't know that.
Native, yes, that's the only place that it grows is North Carolina.
That's amazing. Huh. Wow, I need to look that up. That is absolutely fascinating.
Of course, they can grow cultivated anywhere else in the world, but yeah, that's the only
Mm-hmm.
place that they are naturally occurring.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming on. It was good, educational. It was a great talk. I was glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad that we connected and made this happen.
And I want to thank the audience for tuning in and giving Steffi the welcome that she deserved and the listens that she deserves. That was great. If you want to finish this conversation with me, you can follow me over on Twitter. That is at Edsblog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Or feel free to leave your comments down in the description below. I always answer comments and I always tweet back. So we'll finish out the conversation. If you want to finish the conversation with Steffi, you can find her in several places on social media and YouTube. So why don't you tell us where we can find you?
So on Twitter, I am at Steffi_Cole, Cole. On Instagram, I am also at Steffi_Cole. I am on Goodreads, even if you want to follow along with my reading journey at or Steffi_Cole. And I'm on YouTube as Steffi Cole, so you can find me there as well.
And that will all be linked in the description below. Thanks again. And if you liked this talk, make sure that you leave a thumbs up and a like button and hit that subscribe button if you are not already subscribed. And again, if you are listening back on the audio platform, subscribe over there as well. We put out new content from Ed's World every Tuesday morning, and there's going to be some bonus content here coming up. I was just on the generational gap again, and I always put the audio up when I go on someone else's show, so that'll be coming up in there. We'll get to hear that conversation again. And if you are over on iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts, and it helps us get discovered by a new audience. So thank you for that. As we always say over here on my channel, never ever take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Steffi, you have last word.
Sure. I just want to say, make sure to educate yourself, educate others, be kind to others, lead by example. And I think the world will be a more free place if you do all of those things.
Truer words have never been spoken. Take care, everyone.
Bye.